She didn't look like a fighter. At least, not the kind they were used to seeing at Titan Gym. No flashy gloves, no loud entrance, no cocky attitude. Just a calm, composed black woman in a hoodie, quietly signing in for her first boxing class. The moment she stepped onto the mat, the whispers started. Some laughed. Others rolled their eyes. One smug fighter even joked that she was in the wrong place, that maybe yoga or Zumba would be more her speed. No one knew her name. No one knew her past. But they were about to learn the hard way that you should never, ever judge someone by their appearance. Because by the end of the session, the same woman they mocked would drop an 80 kg amateur fighter flat on his back with a single punch, and leave the entire gym in stunned silence. What happened in that ring wasn't just a knockout, it was a wake-up call. This is the story of Ava Carter, the woman they tried to humiliate and the warrior they never saw coming. It was Ava Carter's first day at Titan Gym, one of the most exclusive boxing clubs in downtown Los Angeles. Known for its state of the art, equipment, and celebrity clientele, Titan wasn't just a gym. It was a status symbol. Instagram influencers posed between sets, amateur fighters posted sparring clips online, and everyone seemed to have something to prove. Everyone except Ava. She walked in quietly, wearing simple black leggings and a faded hoodie. No designer sports bra, no high-tech earbuds, no team logo gear. Her gloves were old but well maintained, tucked under her arm like a familiar companion. She kept her head down as she checked in, but that didn't stop the stares. Ava, a soft-spoken black woman in her early 30s, didn't fit the crowd. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to be noticed, but that, ironically, made her impossible to ignore. As she entered the main training area, a few people glanced up from their warm-ups. Then the whispers started. "Who's that? New girl. She looks lost." Coach Rick spotted her from across the room. He was in his mid-40s, barrel-chested, and loud enough to be heard over the music thumping through the speakers. He prided himself on his no-nonsense coaching style and quick wit, which usually came at someone else's expense. He walked over, sizing her up with a smirk that made Ava feel like she was being judged by more than just her fitness level. "You sure you're in the right class, sweetheart?" he said, eyes narrowing. "This isn't yoga." Laughter rippled through the room. A few of the regulars nudged each other and smirked. One guy, in particular, Mason, stood out. Towering over most of the class, the 80-kilogram amateur fighter had a reputation for being cocky and ruthless in sparring. He let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Careful, coach. She might throw a punch and break a nail." Ava looked at him, then at Coach Rick. She didn't react. No biting comeback, no defensive words. Just a polite, almost amused smile. Without saying anything, she walked over to the side, sat on a bench, and began wrapping her hands. Her fingers moved with ease, wrapping the fabric in a way that was clearly second nature. She didn't fumble. She didn't ask for help. It was the kind of motion that came from repetition thousands of times. Coach Rick noticed. "You ever boxed before?" he asked, still sounding skeptical. Ava shook her head. "Nope." Rick nodded slowly, not convinced. "Then don't expect miracles." The warm-up began with jump rope drills. The rest of the class attacked the ropes like they were in a Rocky montage, trying to outpace one another. Mason, shirtless and flexing between jumps, kept glancing at Ava with a smirk, but Ava didn't seem rattled. She wasn't showy, but she was steady, her rhythm clean and effortless. Her rope barely touched the ground, her breathing calm. From there they moved to shadowboxing. Ava found a space in the corner and began to move. Her stance was orthodox, tight, professional, looking too tight for a beginner. Her punches weren't wild like most first-timers. They were calculated, crisp, controlled. Coach Rick watched from across the gym, arms folded. Something's off, he thought. Either she's lying or she's a natural freak. Still, he didn't say anything. Maybe she was just athletic. Maybe she watched too many YouTube tutorials. That wasn't unheard of, but Mason couldn't let it go. As the class transitioned to partner drills, he nudged one of the other guys and whispered loudly, "Hey, someone should tell her it's not a dance class. She's over there doing ballerina footwork." Ava heard him but didn't look his way. She was used to this, being underestimated, judged, dismissed before she ever threw a punch. She'd dealt with worse in her life, and truthfully, she didn't come here to prove anything. She came to breathe, to sweat, to release some of the pressure she'd been holding in for years. Boxing was supposed to be fun, that was all, but sometimes fun has a funny way of turning into something else. And Ava Carter was holding back for now. She tied off her wraps, slipped her gloves on, and glanced at the ring. She wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble was looking for her. The warm-up started with laps around the gym. Most of the class ran in a tight pack, but Ava hung back, finding her rhythm without trying to keep up or stand out. As she jogged, she could feel the stares following her like shadows. People weren't even subtle about it. Whispers, side glances, snorts of laughter. They saw her as the odd one out, the quiet new girl who clearly didn't belong. By the second lap, Mason had drifted closer. He jogged backward in front of her, throwing lazy jabs in the air and making cartoonish whoosh sounds every time he punched. "Better watch out, folks," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "We got a real street fighter here. Hope you got your insurance, princess." A few people chuckled. Ava didn't even blink. She kept running, smooth and steady, as if Mason wasn't even there. Then came shadow boxing. Coach Rick barked instructions while the students found their spots in front of the wall mirrors. Ava stood quietly in the far corner, away from the crowd, and began moving. She didn't perform for the mirror like the others did. No flexing, no over-the-top movements, just controlled, fluid motion. Her footwork was tight. Her jabs snapped with precision. Her pivots were exact. If anyone had been paying attention, they'd know this wasn't her first time dancing with her fists. But Mason wasn't paying attention, at least not to her skill. He shadow-boxed aggressively nearby, glancing at her between every overacted punch. "Boom," he shouted, throwing a wild uppercut. "Knockout." He started making loud grunting noises, like a gorilla pounding its chest. "You might want to stay out of the ring, princess," he said with a grin. "Wouldn't want that pretty face getting messed up." Ava stayed silent. Her eyes focused on the movement in front of her, not the noise around her, but inside something began to stir. Not anger, not frustration. Something deeper. A rising awareness that this place, this class, wasn't built for people like her. Not just because she was new, or a woman, or black, but because she didn't fit the mold they had already created in their heads. Then came the heavy bag drills. Coach Rick pointed everyone toward the rows of hanging bags and gave them 3 combo sequences to work on. Most of the class attacked the bags with intensity, but very few had technique. Ava took her time. She adjusted her stance, slipped into position, and let her hands go. Pop, pop, pop. Her punches rang out with that distinct whip-like crack, not the thud of force, but the snap of perfect form. She moved around the bag like it was a living opponent, light on her feet, head moving just enough, timing her strikes with surgical precision. Coach Rick walked by, pretending not to be surprised. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked, stopping just behind her. Ava paused and turned slightly, just watching some videos. Rick stared at her for a beat, then nodded slowly. Right, but his tone said otherwise. He didn't buy it. Not for a second. When it came time for partner drills, the room grew awkwardly quiet. Everyone began pairing off without making eye contact with Ava. She stood alone, adjusting her gloves, waiting. Coach Rick scanned the group and looked like he was about to step in when Mason sauntered over. "I'll take her," he said loudly. "I don't mind going easy." He gave Ava a wide, mocking grin as he put on his gloves. "Let's see what you got, champ." A few classmates chuckled. Even Coach Rick gave a hesitant nod, unsure of what was about to happen. Ava didn't react. She just stepped onto the mat and rolled her shoulders, calm and composed. They squared off across from each other. "Don't worry," Mason said as he bounced on his toes. "I won't hit too hard. I know you probably bruise easy." Ava looked at him, finally letting a small smirk crack her otherwise expressionless face. "Thanks," she said softly. "I'll try to be gentle too." Mason laughed, clearly thinking she was joking. Coach Rick called out, "Light sparring, just touch and move, no real hits." Mason nodded. But his eyes gleamed with something else. Ava closed her fists. What happened next would change everything. The ring felt smaller than it looked from the outside. Ava and Mason stood on opposite sides, gloves up, eyes locked. The energy in the gym shifted. People who had been mindlessly working the bags or chatting by the water coolers paused, sensing something was about to go down. This was supposed to be a simple, light sparring session, a friendly warm-up, but Ava could already feel the weight of Mason's ego tightening the air like a storm about to break. Coach Rick stepped between them, hands raised. "All right," he said, looking directly at Mason. "Light work. Touch and move, no haymakers. We're here to learn, not to kill each other." Mason nodded, his mouth guard in, bouncing lightly on his feet. "Yeah, coach, I got it." But Ava saw it in his eyes. He had no intention of holding back. The bell rang. Mason came at her immediately, gloves flying. He was fast, sure, but sloppy. His punches had more muscle than purpose, his footwork loud and aggressive. He jabbed toward her face, missing by a breath. Then came a right cross that grazed her shoulder. Ava slipped the shot, light on her feet, pivoting away with the grace of someone who wasn't just reacting. She was reading him. Mason smirked. "Oh, so you can move. All right then, let's dance." He closed the gap, throwing a flurry of punches. Ava ducked under a hook, sidestepped a jab, and pivoted again. She didn't throw a single punch. She didn't have to. Every miss made Mason sloppier. Every dodge chipped at his pride. The crowd around the ring grew. A few phones were raised. No one expected a knockout, but they sensed drama, and drama was good for content. Coach Rick shouted, "Ease up, Mason, watch the power," but Mason wasn't listening. He feinted a jab, and then, without warning, launched a wild right hook, reckless, off, balance, and aimed directly at Ava's head. That's when she struck. In one fluid motion, Ava pivoted on her back foot and launched a sharp left cross tight, quick and devastatingly accurate. Her glove cracked against Mason's jaw with a snap that echoed through the gym like a gunshot. Crack. Mason's eyes went glassy. His body stiffened. His knees buckled. He dropped like a sack of bricks, flat. On his back, for a second, no one moved. The music kept playing in the background, oblivious to the silence that swept over the gym floor. Mouths hung open. A few people gasped audibly. One woman near the ring dropped her water bottle. Coach Rick was the first to react. "Mason," he called out, jumping into the ring and kneeling beside him. "Mason, you all right?" Mason groaned faintly, eyes fluttering. He was breathing but barely conscious. The crowd stared in disbelief. A few people rushed forward. One guy whispered, "Did she just knock him out?" Ava stood still, her gloves lowered, breathing steady. Her face was calm, not smug, not triumphant, just calm. Her eyes flicked toward Coach Rick, then the crowd, then back to the man lying unconscious at her feet. "Sorry," she said quietly. Reflex. Coach Rick slowly looked up at her, his face pale. Who are you?" Ava blinked. "A beginner," she said simply. Coach Rick didn't respond. He just stared, as if trying to piece together what he'd just seen. The ring was chaos now. Mason was sitting up slowly, still dazed, helped by two guys and a very confused-looking assistant trainer. Someone had called for ice. Someone else muttered something about calling an ambulance just to be safe. But all eyes kept drifting back to Ava. She stepped down from the ring, calm as ever, and removed her gloves. Her hands were steady, no adrenaline shakes. No panic. She picked up her water bottle and towel like it was just another day at the gym. People whispered as she walked past. "Did you see that punch? She's not a beginner. Where the hell did she learn to fight like that?" But Ava didn't stop to explain. She wasn't there to prove anything, not really. What she'd done wasn't about ego. It wasn't even about Mason. It was about respect, and now, finally, she had their attention. That night, the energy inside Titan Gym didn't settle. It smoldered. Mason's knockout spread like wildfire. One of the onlookers had posted the sparring clip to Instagram with the caption, "New girl just slept Mason with one punch, flushed face, #Titan Gym, #1 hit KO." The video blew up in hours, views racked up by the thousands, then tens of thousands. Comments poured in, "Who is she? No way, that's a beginner. Somebody sign her." By morning, Ava Carter had become a name again, and not just inside the gym. When she walked in the next day, the room didn't erupt with laughter or sigh, dies like it had before. There were no snide comments, no jokes, just silence. Every pair of eyes turned toward her, but not with mockery this time, with a cautious sort of reverence. Even Mason, who stood off to the side near the locker room, wearing sunglasses and a bruised ego, gave her a slow, sheepish nod. Ava returned it, neutral as ever, her expression unreadable. Coach Rick waited for her by the office, arms crossed, a strange look on his face. "Ava," he called, motioning her over. "Got a minute." She walked over calmly, towel slung around her neck. "What's up, Coach?" He closed the office door behind her. "I looked you up last night." Ava paused, then tilted her head slightly. "Oh," Rick's voice lowered. "You're Ava the Ghost Carter, former Golden Gloves champion, 24 wins, 0 losses in the amateurs. You had offers from every major gym on the West Coast, and then you vanished." Ava exhaled slowly, eyes cast downward. "Yeah, I stepped away." "Why?" Rick asked, clearly baffled. "You were a prodigy, your footwork, timing, instincts. It's like second nature to you." She looked up at him, her voice soft but steady. "My brother, Malik, passed away, car accident. He was my corner, my trainer, my everything. When he died, I didn't just lose him. I lost the fight, too. I didn't want to keep going without him. I didn't want the spotlight, the noise, the pressure. So I left." Rick stared at her, a touch of guilt flickering in his eyes. "And now you're back." Ava smiled faintly. "Not really. I just wanted a place to train, clear my head. I figured this was a good way to stay in shape, that's all." Rick rubbed the back of his neck. "I've been coaching for 15 years, and I've never misjudged someone this badly." "You weren't the only one," she said with a small shrug. There was a long pause before Rick finally said, "You're welcome here, Ava, more than welcome, and if you ever want to coach or compete again, hell, I'll back you 100%. I appreciate that, Rick." Ava replied, "But I'm not here to impress anyone. I just needed to move again, to feel something in the ring. That's all." When she stepped back onto the gym floor, the atmosphere was different. There was no longer a wall between her and the others. Instead, people stepped aside with respect. Some smiled. Others offered polite nods. Even the women who had sneered at her before now watched with awe as she wrapped her hands. One guy, younger, maybe 19 or 20, walked up nervously. "Miss Carter, would you mind showing me that pivot you used yesterday, the way you slipped that hook?" Ava glanced at him and gave a gentle nod. "Sure, let's work on it." Within minutes, a small circle formed around her. Not to mock, not to test, but to learn. She wasn't just another girl at the gym anymore. She was a story that had walked into their lives silent, powerful, and unforgettable. A storm in disguise, and now no one would ever underestimate her again. It was just after a quiet Thursday evening class when Mason walked up to Ava again. His steps were slower, more measured this time, not cocky, not arrogant, just sincere. The swelling around his jaw had gone down, but the bruise lingered like a reminder, faded and pale but not forgotten. Ava was toweling off, about to leave, when she noticed him approaching. "Hey," Mason said, scratching the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact for a moment. "Listen, about that punch, I had it coming. I was a jerk. Thought I was the king of this place. You, brought me back to earth." Ava raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Mason chuckled nervously. "Okay, maybe not back to earth, more like down to the mat." Ava smiled. "Yeah, you did deserve it." Mason let out a breathy laugh, nodding. "Fair enough, but hey, any chance I could train with you? I mean actually train, no jokes, I just..." He hesitated, his tone genuine. "I want to get better. And I figure the best way to learn is from the one who knocked me out cold." Ava gave him a look. "You sure your chin can handle another lesson?" He grinned. "I'll bring headgear this time." And just like that, something shifted. What started as a rivalry dissolved into an unexpected alliance. Mason became her first real student. He showed up early, stayed late, followed her instructions to the letter. He listened more, talked less. His footwork sharpened, his punches got cleaner. He didn't just want to prove something to others anymore. He wanted to earn her respect. And he wasn't alone. Word had spread about who Ava really was. By the end of that week, more and more members of the gym began asking her for tips. Some were quiet about it, approaching her privately, while others boldly requested help in the middle of class. It didn't take long before Coach Rick noticed the subtle shift in hierarchy. Ava wasn't just training next to people anymore, she was leading them. One evening, after a particularly intense group session where Ava had helped 5 different people work their drills, Rick pulled her aside. "You've got a gift," he said, arms crossed, a thoughtful look on his face. "Not just in the ring, out here too, people listen to you. You've got patience, presence, authority without ego. Ever thought about coaching?" Ava looked up, the question catching her slightly off guard. "Maybe, I've thought about it a little, but if I do this, I want it to mean something." Rick raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to start a program," she said. "A community outreach class, free training for underprivileged youth, kids who don't have the money for memberships, gear, or fancy gyms, kids like Malik and me back when we were just scraping by." In South Central, Rick blinked, then slowly nodded. "All right, you've got yourself a deal. You run the program, I'll fund it. Let's make it happen." And they did. Within 2 weeks, Titan Gym opened its doors every Saturday morning to young boys and girls from the neighborhood. Some came timid and unsure, others full of fire and energy, but under Ava's guidance, they found discipline, self, worth, and belonging. She taught them how to fight, but more importantly, she taught them how to stand tall, no matter who tried to knock them down. Back in the regular classes, Mason became her biggest cheerleader. He told anyone who would listen, "The best lesson I ever learned came from the woman who knocked me out, and I'll take that punch 100 times if it means learning from her." Ava never bragged. She didn't need to. Her legacy was in the eyes of the students she trained, the kids who walked a little taller, the fighters who finally understood respect. The gym that had once laughed at her now hung on her every word. She didn't need the spotlight anymore. She was the light. Ava Carter had stepped into Titan Gym hoping to find peace through sweat and solitude. But what she found, what she built, was something greater than even she expected. She didn't just return to boxing. She rose from its ashes, stronger, wiser, and more powerful than ever. She wasn't just back. She was building a legacy that would never be forgotten. Ava Carter's story wasn't just about knocking out a cocky fighter. It was about something much bigger: dignity, resilience, and the power of quiet strength. She walked into a room where she was underestimated, mocked, and judged for how she looked. But instead of lashing out, she let her actions speak. Her one punch did more than flatten Mason. It shattered the stereotypes and egos surrounding her. And in doing so, Ava reminded everyone that you never really know who you're messing with until it's too late. What started as humiliation turned into redemption, not just for Ava, but for the entire class that learned from her example. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales like this one. Have you ever been underestimated and proved people wrong? Drop your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. This is Hidden Realities, where untold stories come to life. Until next time, never judge a book by its cover, especially if it wears gloves.